Your baby just went completely still, eyes locked on a spot above your shoulder, not blinking, not smiling, just staring. You turned around. Nothing was there. But she kept staring, tracking something, following it with her eyes across the room. What did she see? Welcome to Silent Baby Mind. Subscribe right now, because what you're about to learn today will permanently change the way you look at your child. There are 8 things your baby can perceive right now, in these early months of life, that you have either lost, suppressed, or never had access to in the same way. Some of these abilities fade by the time your child is a toddler. Others stay hidden in plain sight for years, quietly shaping the bond between you and your child without either of you realizing it. Don't go anywhere, because number 8 is the one that explains almost every confusing thing your baby has ever done in the middle of the night. Number 1. Let's start with something you've probably noticed but never really questioned. Your newborn turns her head toward you specifically, not toward your partner, not toward a stranger, toward you, within days of being born. For a long time, this was chalked up to simple bonding. But researchers studying newborn olfaction have found something far more precise happening. A baby's sense of smell is functionally mature before birth, and within the first few days of life, infants can already distinguish their own mother's scent from that of another lactating woman. Studies using breast pads and gauze placed near a newborn's face found that infants consistently turned toward the pad carrying their own mother's scent and showed calming behaviors, slower heart rate, reduced crying, specifically in response to it. This isn't a vague preference. It's a chemical recognition system that was already working before your baby ever opened her eyes in the outside world. Amniotic fluid carries traces of what the mother eats, and newborns arrive already familiar with that chemical signature, which is part of why some researchers believe early exposure to a varied maternal diet during pregnancy may shape an infant's later willingness to accept new foods. The same olfactory sensitivity extends to the chest and skin. Infants placed skin to skin with their mother shortly after birth show a measurable preference for the unwashed breast over a washed one, following the scent with small head movements until they locate it, a behavior some researchers believe is one of the contributing mechanisms behind the early breastfeeding instinct. Your baby didn't learn to recognize you after birth. She already knew you. Keep watching, because number 2 is even harder to believe, and it has to do with something your baby can hear before she's even born. Number 2, by the time your baby is born, her hearing isn't a blank slate. It's already been collecting data for months. The cochlea, the inner ear structure responsible for hearing, is fully developed by around the 20th week of pregnancy. And from that point on, the fetus is listening. Not perfectly. Sound is muffled and distorted through amniotic fluid in the walls of the womb, similar to what you'd hear underwater. But the rhythm, pitch, and pattern of voices get through, especially the mother's voice, which also travels through bone and tissue directly to the inner ear, giving it a uniquely strong and clear signal compared to outside sounds. Researchers using fetal heart rate monitoring and, later, newborn sucking response studies found that infants show a measurable preference for their mother's voice over other female voices within hours of birth. In one well-known line of research, newborns were given a pacifier wired to a recording system, and their sucking patterns could trigger either their mother's voice or a stranger's voice. Babies consistently adjusted their sucking rhythm to access their own mother's voice more often. Even more strikingly, infants have shown recognition of specific stories or rhymes that were read aloud repeatedly during the final weeks of pregnancy, responding differently to the familiar pattern of language, even though they couldn't possibly understand the words. Some researchers have extended this further, finding that newborns appear to prefer the specific language their mother spoke during pregnancy over an unfamiliar language, picking up on rhythm and cadence rather than meaning. This early auditory exposure is thought to lay groundwork for language acquisition long before a baby says her first word, tuning the developing brain to the particular sounds, stresses, and patterns it will need to decode later. Your baby arrived already knowing the sound of home. Stay with us, because number 3 explains a behavior nearly every parent has misread as bad vision. Number 3. You've probably noticed your baby doesn't seem to look directly at things the way you do. Maybe you've worried something is wrong with her eyes. It isn't. Newborn vision is often described as blurry, and that's true at a distance. But at close range, somewhere between 8 and 12 inches, almost exactly the distance between a nursing infant's eyes and her mother's face, vision is sharper than most parents realize. What's even more specific is what babies are drawn to look at. Research using preferential-looking experiments, where infants are shown 2 images side by side and researchers track which one they stare at longer, has found that newborns consistently prefer face-like patterns over scrambled or random arrangements of the same features. They're not just seeing shapes. They appear to arrive with a built-in bias toward anything that resembles 2 eyes above a mouth, an arrangement researchers call the top-heavy configuration. This preference shows up within hours of birth, before a baby has had any real opportunity to learn what a face is supposed to look like. Color vision develops more slowly. Newborns see the world mostly in shades of gray, with limited sensitivity to red, which is part of why high-contrast black and white patterns tend to hold an infant's attention more effectively than soft pastels in the earliest weeks. Full-color vision develops gradually over the following months as the cone cells in the retina mature. Some developmental psychologists argue the early face preference is one of the clearest pieces of evidence that the human brain comes pre-wired, at least in a basic way, to seek out social connection from the very first day, before learning could plausibly explain it. Your baby isn't failing to focus on the world around her. She's locked onto the one pattern that matters most, your face, at exactly the distance where she can see it best. Up next, number 4 is something your baby is doing to you constantly, something invisible, automatic, and almost impossible to fake. Number 4. Here's something that should genuinely change the way you think about every interaction with your baby. You are not the only one regulating this relationship. She is too. Developmental researcher Ed Tronick, building on attachment work originally laid out by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, demonstrated this most famously through what's called the still face experiment. In it, a parent interacts warmly with their infant, then suddenly adopts a flat, unresponsive expression for a short period before resuming normal interaction. Infants as young as a few months old respond to this shift almost immediately, increasing their own bids for attention at first, smiling, reaching, vocalizing, then withdrawing, looking away, and showing visible distress when the connection isn't restored. What this reveals is that babies aren't passive recipients of a parent's mood. They are actively reading your face moment to moment and adjusting their own behavior in response. This back and forth has a name in developmental science: contingent responsiveness, and Tronick described the natural ebb and flow of connection and brief misalignment between parent and infant as a process of rupture and repair, arguing that it's the repair, not the constant perfect harmony, that actually builds resilience. Every minor mismatch your baby experiences and then recovers from, you look away for a moment, then return, is a small rehearsal for handling disappointment later in life. This exchange isn't just psychological. Researcher Allan Schore's work on the developing brain shows that this rapid exchange of facial expression and emotional tone is directly involved in shaping how an infant's nervous system learns to regulate stress over the following years, particularly through the right hemisphere of the brain, which matures earlier than the left and is heavily involved in processing emotional and social information. Every time your baby studies your face and adjusts what she does next, she's not just reacting to you. She's building the neural architecture she'll use to handle emotion for the rest of her life. What comes next, number 5, is something most parents notice, but almost nobody can explain. Number 5. Watch a baby reach for something just slightly out of range, and you'll see something strange. She doesn't just reach with her hand. Her whole body leans, her feet push against whatever surface she's on. Her other arm extends for balance. This is proprioception, the sense of where your own body is in space without having to look at it. And in infants, it's still being calibrated in real time. Unlike vision or hearing, proprioceptive maps of the body aren't something a baby is born with fully formed. They're built through repetition, through thousands of small movements, kicks, reaches, rolls that teach the developing brain exactly how long each limb is and how much force it takes to move it. This is part of why newborns sometimes appear startled by their own arms, a reflex called the Moro reflex, where a sudden change in position triggers a flailing, grasping response as if the baby is trying to catch herself. She isn't entirely sure yet where her body ends. This same uncertainty shows up in early hand regard, a behavior where infants around 2 to 3 months old will hold a hand up in front of their face and stare at it, turning it slowly, almost as though encountering it for the first time. Researchers believe this is one of the earliest steps in building a coherent body map, the infant brain essentially cross-referencing what it sees with what it feels in order to confirm that the hand belongs to her. Occupational therapists and developmental researchers who study early motor learning describe this period as the foundation for every coordinated movement that comes later: crawling, walking, eventually handwriting, all of it built on top of this slow, repetitive process of figuring out where the body is and how it moves. Every time your baby bats at a toy and misses, then tries again and gets slightly closer, she's not just playing. She's running a calibration process more sophisticated than anything in a robotics lab, and she's doing it almost entirely without your help. What comes next, number 6, explains why babies seem to know when something is wrong before anyone tells them. Number 6, you think you're hiding your stress well. Your baby disagrees. Infants are remarkably sensitive to physiological signals that have nothing to do with words, tone of voice, muscle tension, breathing rate, and even subtle shifts in skin temperature and scent tied to cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Research on what's known as physiological synchrony has found that a caregiver's stress levels and an infant's stress levels tend to rise and fall together over the course of a day, measured through cortisol sampling in both parent and child. This isn't simply babies picking up on obvious cues like a raised voice. Some studies have found measurable changes in infant heart rate and cortisol in response to a caregiver's internal stress state, even when that caregiver was actively trying to appear calm, suggesting the channel of communication runs deeper than tone or facial expression alone. Researchers studying maternal mental health have repeatedly found that infants of mothers experiencing high stress or postpartum depression show different patterns of physiological regulation, even in completely silent, low-stimulation settings. And some of this research has tracked these differences forward in time, finding associations with how a child later handles novel or mildly stressful situations as a toddler. This doesn't mean a stressful day permanently damages a child. The nervous system is remarkably adaptable, and researchers studying resilience consistently find that responsive, attentive caregiving over time matters far more than any single difficult afternoon. But it does mean your baby is reading you constantly, not through your words, but through a layer of biological information you didn't even know you were broadcasting. This is part of why simply telling yourself to calm down before walking into the nursery actually matters. Your body language was never the main signal. Your nervous system was. What comes next, number 7, is something almost every parent has watched happen without realizing how early it actually starts. Number 7. Long before your baby can speak, she's already reading emotion off your face with surprising accuracy. Researchers studying early emotion perception have found that infants as young as a few months old can reliably distinguish between a happy expression and an angry one, even when the faces shown are of people they've never seen before. This isn't simple pattern matching. Using a method called habituation, where infants are repeatedly shown one type of expression until they grow bored and look away less, researchers can tell that a baby's interest spikes again the moment a new emotional expression appears, evidence that she's actually categorizing what she sees, not just registering visual change. By around 7 months, many infants begin showing a measurable bias toward threat-related expressions, looking longer at fearful or angry faces than happy ones, a pattern some researchers interpret as an early warning system, prioritizing attention toward signals that might indicate danger in the environment. This early skill is closely tied to a process called social referencing, where a baby facing an uncertain or unfamiliar situation, a new toy, a stranger approaching, an unexpected sound, will look directly at her caregiver's face before deciding how to react. If your expression reads as calm or pleased, she's more likely to relax and explore. If your expression reads as alarmed, she's far more likely to become distressed herself. In this sense, your face functions almost like a weather report for your baby's nervous system, and she checks it constantly, often without you noticing she's doing it at all. Which brings us to number 8, the ability that explains nearly every confusing nighttime moment you've ever had with your baby. Number 8, here's what almost nobody tells new parents. Your baby's sleep doesn't work like yours, and it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Adult sleep cycles through distinct stages over roughly 90 minutes, with deep, hard to wake from sleep making up a large portion of the night. Infant sleep is structured almost the opposite way. Newborns spend a much larger proportion of total sleep time in active sleep, a stage similar to REM in adults, where the brain is highly active, breathing is irregular, and the baby is far easier to startle awake. Researchers studying infant sleep architecture believe this isn't a flaw in the system. Active sleep is thought to play a critical role in early brain development, supporting the rapid wiring of neural connections happening during the first year of life, a period in which the brain is forming synaptic connections at a rate it will never reach again later in life. Some researchers argue active sleep also serves a protective function, keeping infants closer to a wakeable state during a developmental period, when they are biologically dependent on a caregiver for survival, since a newborn that slept too deeply for too long would be slower to signal hunger, discomfort, or danger. Over the following months, the proportion of active sleep gradually decreases as deep, slow-wave sleep takes up a larger share of the night, which is part of why sleep patterns shift so noticeably between the newborn stage and the first birthday. This is also why your baby might startle, twitch, whimper, or briefly cry out during sleep without actually waking up. Her brain is cycling through a stage of sleep your own brain mostly outgrew using for that purpose long ago. So when you find yourself exhausted at 3 a.m, wondering why your baby can't just sleep through the night like everyone promised, understand that her nervous system isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly the demanding, important work it's supposed to be doing at this exact stage of life. Here's what all 8 of these abilities have in common. None of them are signs that something is unusual about your child. They're signs of exactly how sophisticated a newborn brain and body actually are, built by evolution to recognize a caregiver, regulate emotion in real time, calibrate an entire body from scratch, read faces for safety cues, and survive a vulnerable stage of life using tools you can no longer fully see in action because you outgrew them decades ago. None of this requires you to do anything dramatic or unusual as a parent. The research behind every one of these abilities consistently points back to the same simple conclusion, that ordinary responsive interaction, showing your face, talking, holding, responding when your baby reaches for you, is exactly the kind of input this remarkable system was built to receive. The next time your baby stares a little too long at your face, twitches in her sleep, or seems to know you're stressed before you've said a word, you're not imagining anything. You're watching a nervous system doing extraordinarily complex work, quietly, every single day, and you are very likely already giving her exactly what she needs to do that work well. If this video helped you understand your baby a little better, make sure to subscribe, give it a like, and leave a comment letting us know which one of these surprised you the most. See you in the next video.